At 4 a.m. on August 23, 1914, a special express train departed from the German military headquarters and arrived at Hanover Station. On it was 66-year-old German General Ludendorff, who had just received orders from Moltke to head to Eastern Prussia and assume command of the German forces on the Eastern Front. Ludendorff unfolded a map and briefed Ludendorff on the frontline situation. The German troops were not faring well on the Eastern Front, currently engaged in an orderly retreat along the railway. However, the pursuing Russian forces were divided by Lake Masuria, presenting an opportunity. Ludendorff suggested that this was a godsend, hinting at a tactic known to every Prussian military academy student, the Battle of Cannae, where Hannibal annihilated the Roman army in similar terrain. Unexpectedly, this battle would be Germany's most glorious victory of 1914, changing the fates of countless individuals, including Ludendorff and Rudendorff, the German Empire, and the 60 million Germans in the midst of war. This battle was the Battle of Tannenberg. "Thank God, the war has begun," exclaimed Austrian General Victor Danker upon hearing the declaration of war. This optimism was prevalent among the Austrian High Command. Another Austrian general, Alexander Orenna, confidently stated, "Austria, in terms of war potential, is probably greater than the United States." However, the war potential of the Austro-Hungarian Empire was never realized, primarily due to its dualistic political structure. In 1867, Emperor Franz Joseph signed an agreement with the Hungarians, splitting the empire into two. Henceforth, all decisions in Vienna had to be negotiated with Budapest, including anything unfavorable to Hungary, such as military expenses. Hungary vehemently opposed Vienna's plans for military expansion and refused to bear additional military costs. By 1903, Hungary's population was 3 times that of Romania, yet it shared equal military expenses with the Balkan nation. In fact, Hungary's concerns were justified, as Archduke Ferdinand had devised a wartime plan targeting Hungary specifically. This led to a tragic situation for the Austro-Hungarian army before World War I. Nevertheless, they encountered a self-important chief of staff, Franz Conrad, who eagerly awaited war. He proposed war over 25 times in 1913 alone. After the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, there was no one left to stop him from initiating war. However, Conrad's skills as chief of staff were catastrophic. His offensive tactics, including deep penetration, flanking maneuvers, and frontal assaults, were ineffective due to the diverse composition of the army and communication barriers between officers and soldiers. Moreover, corruption among officers further undermined the army's effectiveness. Before the war, Conrad devised 2 plans, Plan B against Serbia and Plan R against Russia. Following the outbreak of war, he decided to execute Plan B first, aiming to defeat Serbia with overwhelming force before turning to Plan R and facing Russia. However, Austria's mobilization was slower than anticipated, and Russia's mobilization was faster due to the extensive railway network funded by France. Consequently, Conrad's plans were thwarted within days of the war's outbreak. The Second Army had to be redirected to Serbia and then to Galicia, missing the crucial Battle of Galicia due to delays and logistical challenges. Meanwhile, on the Serbian front, Austrian forces suffered heavy casualties and setbacks, culminating in the disastrous Battle of Sur Mountain. In just 10 days of fighting, the Austro-Hungarian army suffered 27,000 casualties, lost significant military supplies, and dealt a severe blow to Vienna's warhawks. Yet, they had no idea that the defeat on the Drina River was just the beginning of a larger disaster awaiting them in Galicia. On the Eastern Front, the Russian Empire, dubbed the Steamroller by the German-Austrian alliance, boasted a population of 170 million with 74,000 kilometers of railway and steel production surpassing that of France and Austria, second only to the United States. Despite its industrial growth reaching nearly 8% in the 1880s and ranking as the world's 6th largest trading power and 4th largest industrial nation by 1914, Russia, like Austria-Hungary, faced systemic issues. Since the failure of the Crimean War in 1856, Russia had embarked on industrialization under state control, lacking capital accumulation and resorting to excessive exploitation of agriculture. By the early 20th century, 2 Russias emerged, one represented by St. Petersburg, characterized by westernization, elitism, and rapid expansion, and the other by Moscow, embodying Slavic conservatism, poverty, and backwardness. The Russo-Japanese War of 1905 exacerbated tensions between these two Russias, leading to clashes and concessions from Tsar Nicholas II, including the establishment of the Duma and reforms under Stolypin. However, these efforts were short-lived, and with the outbreak of World War I, Russia discovered numerous flaws in its vast war machine. The quality of Russian soldiers was lacking, with a literacy rate of less than 1/3, and officers were in short supply. By the outbreak of war, the Russian army had only 8,500 officers, compared to Germany's 65,000. Additionally, Russia's immense mobilization of 15 million troops strained industrial resources, leading to inefficiencies and shortages on the front lines. The Russian High Command remained optimistic and even entertained ambitions of capturing Berlin and Vienna. On August 17, 1914, Russian forces launched an offensive into East Prussia, taking advantage of the majority of German forces being deployed on the Western Front for the Schlieffen Plan. However, due to Austro-Hungarian difficulties in Galicia, the Russian commander, Prittwitz, received orders to counterattack. On August 20th, the Battle of Gumbinnen commenced, with the Germans initially launching a flank attack with 7 divisions before retreating. As the Russians pursued, their forces became divided, leading to dire consequences. Meanwhile, the Germans quickly reorganized due to their superior railway network. A German staff officer, Hoffmann, recognized an opportunity due to the discord between the Russian commanders and devised a bold plan. This plan involved quietly encircling Samsonov's forces and annihilating them before any reinforcements arrived, laying the groundwork for the Battle of Tannenberg. On August 23rd, Ludendorff and Rudendorff arrived on the Eastern Front, replacing Prittwitz and heeding Hoffmann's advice. They even ordered the German retreat to expedite their plans. Further good news arrived on August 24th, when intercepted telegrams revealed the disarray among the Russian forces, providing confirmation of their imminent demise. On the afternoon of the 24th, the Battle of Tannenberg officially began, and the German forces quickly gained the upper hand overnight. By the morning of the 25th, Samsonov was surprised to find his troops surrounded on 3 sides. Despite attempts at charges, the Russian forces were repeatedly repelled by the fierce German firepower until sunset. Samsonov had no choice but to hope for assistance from Rennenkampf to the north. August 26th was the pivotal day of the Battle of Tannenberg. Ludendorff was anxious because his defenses were fragile, and even a single Austrian army sent by Rennenkampf could undo all their efforts. However, when a telegram from the northern front arrived in the afternoon, reporting that Rennenkampf remained stationary, Ludendorff's anxieties eased. Additionally, a significant development occurred as General Francois's First Army, initially tasked with attacking the Russian flank, delayed its assault due to artillery unavailability and moved behind enemy lines, effectively sealing off Samsonov's forces. By August 29th, Samsonov's army finally collapsed, with half of his 250,000 troops annihilated and another 92,000 captured. Samsonov himself committed suicide, while Ludendorff and Hindenburg became national heroes overnight. To commemorate the victory, the German emperor named it the Battle of Tannenberg, symbolizing revenge for the defeat of the Teutonic Knights 5 centuries prior. Meanwhile, another crucial battle unfolded in Galicia, 300 kilometers away. Galicia, located north of the Carpathian Mountains, had historical significance and strategic importance. The Russian deployment of 4 armies totaling 1.2 million aimed to defeat the Austro-Hungarian Empire, driven not only by strategic but also political motives, particularly concerning Ukrainian nationalism. The province was crucial to the Russian Empire's agricultural and industrial production, and its loss would significantly weaken Russia's status as a great power. On August 20th, 3 Austrian army groups arrived in Galicia, marching north towards Poland. Conrad's premature offensive stemmed from underestimating Russian mobilization and overestimating his own. Additionally, logistical shortcomings hampered Austrian operations. Consequently, when the Battle of Galicia commenced, the Russian army enjoyed a 4.3 numerical advantage, unbeknownst to Conrad, due to the lack of reconnaissance aircraft. On August 23rd, skirmishes erupted at Krasnik, where Dankel's First Army repelled the Russian Fourth Army, followed by a pursuit. Meanwhile, Auffenberg's Fourth Army intercepted the Russian Fifth Army at Komarov, securing a favorable position. However, Conrad's carefully calculated plans faltered when the Russian army encircled the Austrian Third and Eighth Armies at Lemberg on August 29th. Lemberg, the capital of Galicia, was a vital railroad junction, and its loss would cut off the Austrian army's retreat, leaving them isolated. The defense of Lemberg fell to Brudemann's Third Army, which, outnumbered 3-1, suffered a major defeat and relinquished the city. This victory demonstrated Russian military prowess and strategic maneuvering, akin to the tactics employed by Moltke in the west. The intercepted Russian telegram on September 11th revealed crucial information about the Russian march routes, aiding Austrian retreat efforts. Despite the setbacks, the Austrian forces managed to avoid total destruction, thanks partly to the slow pace of the Russian pursuit. By September 21st, the Russian advance halted at the Przemysl fortress, akin to Verdun in the east, marking the end of the Galician campaign. The Austrian army lost a total of 350,000 troops in this battle, accounting for 1/3 of the total army. Even Conrad laughed at himself. If Archduke Ferdinand was still alive, he would definitely shoot me for leaving Lemberg. Mid-September, news of the Galician defeat reaches Berlin. But the Germans have no right to laugh at the Austrians, because they also lost a mess in the Battle of the Marne. As a result of this failure, Moltke was dismissed and Falkenhayn took his place. Facing a stalemate on both eastern and western fronts, Germany grappled with the dilemma of resource allocation. Falkenhayn advocated for focusing on the western front, targeting British withdrawal to break France's resilience. In contrast, Ludendorff favoured bolstering the eastern front, convinced that Tannenberg had exposed Russia's vulnerability. This debate persisted for 2 years, nearly resulting in the ousting of the German Emperor, Wilhelm II. Despite their differences, both factions agreed on the imperative of rescuing the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Its collapse would pave the way for a Russian advance into Silesia, spelling doom for the Central Powers. Thus, Ludendorff devised a plan to pressure Warsaw, intending to alleviate Austrian pressure and potentially encircle Russian forces if Austria cooperated. On September 28th, General Mackensen led the newly formed Ninth Army towards Warsaw, only to face an invisible foe dubbed General Mudd. Even before the war broke out, Russia anticipated the invasion by Germany and Austria-Hungary, so they only built a few single-track railways in Poland. The rest of the roads were as terrible as those Napoleon traversed a century ago. The dilapidated roads greatly slowed the German army's march, allowing the 3 army groups at the San River to retreat to Warsaw at leisure. Originally, these Russian troops were to be dealt with by the Austrians, but Conrad only sent 1 army group to engage them, leaving General Dankl lamenting his insufficient strength. On October 10th, the Russian army crossed the Vistula and attacked Mackensen's forces. The battle lasted for 8 days, but with the Austrian army delayed in their arrival, the Germans had no choice but to withdraw. On the southern front, even more dramatic events unfolded. 3 Austrian army groups were overrun by just 2 Russian army groups, leaving Ludendorff to blame Conrad for not actively engaging in battle, while Conrad criticized Ludendorff for his ineffectiveness in both success and failure. Thus, the Battle of Warsaw ended hastily, with the only accomplishment being the deepening of the animosity between the German and Austro-Hungarian forces. On November 11th, Mackensen, with his reinforced Ninth Army, attacked Lodz. The Russian army, caught off guard, retreated into the city. The initial success of the Germans led to the encirclement of Lodz, briefly tipping the scales in their favor. However, at a critical moment, Russian Commander-in-Chief Grand Duke Nicholas discovered a flaw in Mackensen's plan. With Mackensen's forces, he couldn't possibly defeat the Russian army, which outnumbered him 2-1. Urgently, he ordered nearby Russian troops to swiftly reinforce, turning the tables on the Germans. Still hopeful of victory, Mackensen sent 6 reserve divisions from Scheff's corps to outflank the Russians to the east of Lodz, but this isolated force also ended up encircled. On November 22nd, Mackensen ordered a retreat and radioed Scheff to find his own way out. At this point, Scheff's situation was even more desperate than Samsonov's during the Battle of Tannenberg, as there was no one to reinforce him. At dawn on the 23rd, Scheff's troops began to break out. Then a miracle occurred. The tardy Ludendorff, responsible for sealing the pocket, arrived once again, allowing Scheff's forces to break out unimpeded, even taking 10,000 prisoners. Thus, the Battle of Lodz ended with a disastrous victory for the German army, losing 35,000 men, while the Russian casualties numbered 70,000, with 25,000 taken prisoner. In the final month of 1914, both sides ceased major operations. Christmas was approaching, and no one wanted to die before the holiday, except perhaps the Austrians. In Vienna, November was undoubtedly full of despair. In the north, the Austrian army was defeated, leaving the empire with few available troops. In the south, they launched two offensives, both repelled by Serbia. The previously neutral Balkan states had now tilted toward the Allies, and even Italy, a member of the Triple Alliance, showed signs of betrayal. A man named Mussolini, an ambitious figure, was advocating for war, calling for the reconquest of Trentino and Tyrol. With this determination, the Austro-Hungarian forces decided to revive confidence at home and abroad with a victorious campaign against Serbia. Their target was clear: Serbia. At this time, Serbia's situation was dire. It was a landlocked country, connected to the outside world only by a single seaport in Montenegro, making it vulnerable to blockade. Furthermore, the French and Russian aid had run out of ammunition within 3 months of the war, so Vienna was optimistic about this operation, even dividing the spoils of war in advance. The news of the great victory in the southern front spread quickly. Even Germany began victory parades to celebrate the fourth fluttering of the Habsburg flag over Belgrade. However, the festive atmosphere in Germany and Austria did not last even a day, as the Serbians struck back. On the same day that Belgrade fell, 70-year-old Serbian King Peter IV declared the Serbian army officially entered the counteroffensive stage. In the past month, the supply lines of the Austrian army had stretched longer and longer, and they were now at their weakest. Meanwhile, the Serbian army had gathered all its reserves, including police, gendarmes, guerrillas and border guards, totaling 200,000 troops. These troops, along with their last batch of supplies, represented a true fight to the death. If this battle were lost, Serbia would disappear from the map. At 7 a.m. on December 3rd, the Serbian army emerged from the thick fog, launching a surprise attack on the unprepared Austrian forces. The Austrians almost collapsed upon contact, with no resistance on any front, their disintegration unprecedented in speed. In just 2 days, the Serbian army secured victory. By December 9th, Potirek's 500,000-strong army suffered 28,000 killed, 122,000 wounded, and 40,000 missing or captured. On December 16th, the Serbian army recaptured Belgrade. Afterwards, not a single enemy soldier remained on Serbian soil except for prisoners. Despite achieving a glorious victory, the Serbian people paid a tremendous price. In 1914 alone, they lost 160,000 troops, with 70,000 dead. Over the next 4 years, 1/6 of Serbia's population and 2/3 of its adult males would perish, and the entire country would be reduced to ruins. But no one would ask if it was worth it, because the war of resistance was the inevitable result of aggression, and it was the aggressors who should be questioned. 1914 came to an end, but the war did not. Germany's hopes for a swift victory shattered, so what would be their next move? France's territory was still ablaze with warfare, and they yearned to push the front lines back. Britain was mired in an endless quagmire of war, only seeking to preserve its overseas empire. Russia was always ready to sacrifice, but could they withstand the tide of revolution? The Austro-Hungarian Empire was on its last legs, so who would decide its ultimate fate? Serbia was still resisting, but how long could they hold out? And on a larger battlefield, storms were brewing and undercurrents were surging. The Ottomans guarded the Dardanelles, and their choice would determine Russia's fate. Italy coveted Austro-Hungarian territory, and its alignment would affect the southern front. The Balkan countries were still wavering, with no room for error for the small nations. And on the other side of the ocean, the world's leading industrial power had yet to make its move, but every action would influence the course of the war. So, welcome to 1915, the year when this great war reached out to the world.